Hi guys, I'm Leanne.
And I'm Aaron, and we're the owners of Next Level Escape here in Sydney, Australia. So we design and build all our props, rooms, puzzles from scratch. We also take a slightly different approach with our game style where we incorporate more humour, GM interaction, and unique game structures.
Possibly because we get bored easily.
All right.
For this game, talk, our timer is until the coffee gets cold. So let's go.
Okay, I guess we don't need this anymore.
Guess not.
Shall we? As escape rooms evolve, there's a lot of great articles and talks about cool new puzzle mechanics and new improved set design out there, as well as a push towards stronger narratives and more interactive theatre-style experiences. Now, all of these are amazing, and we love experiencing these as players.
But in this talk, we want to cover another aspect of designing your games. That's the idea of changing up the structure of the overall escape room while still keeping it vaguely within bounds of what people expect an escape room to be. So this isn't meant to be prescriptive by any means. It's simply meant to give you a launching point for coming up with ideas to help your game stand out.
We will note there are a lot of things you can do with a blue sky approach, like a limitless budget, but we're going to come from this from the perspective of a small business with a limited budget.
That would be us, by the way.
And we're in a country where wages are quite high.
Think high 20s per hour. I once played an art heist game with 2 actors in the game and 1 person outside running the show. It was amazing, but is that really financially viable for most businesses?
So a gaming experience where there are, say, 5 GMs per 5 people playing might not be the best approach.
So let's start with the basic definition of an escape room. What differentiates it from, say, interactive theatre? For the purposes of this talk, we'll define it as an activity where the main point is to solve puzzles and/or complete challenges to reach a specific objective, and it's an activity where everyone is involved at all times.
So what do we define as puzzles and challenges? Let's keep it loose to avoid being chased by an angry mob of owners who all, I'm sure, have different opinions on what a puzzle is. We'll define puzzles as anything where you need to make connections to find an answer, while challenges are set tasks you complete to make something happen.
Okay, so boring definitions aside, what do we mean when we talk about changing up the structure? 1, the social mechanics. Games can encourage unique social interactions with the games master or with other players in the room.
2, the overall room mechanics. So where puzzles are essentially the building blocks for different game frameworks. In this case, of course, there are lots of other ways to do this, but we have a time limit here, so let's start with the social mechanics.
There are 2 main kinds of social interactions you'll have in a game. Between the players and the GM, and between the players themselves. We'll start with the GM interactions. In this case, we'll talk about the standard scenario where the GMs aren't an actor in the room. We'll leave that to people with actual theatre experience. But the GMs are actually running the game from outside the room.
So if you think about it, the GMs in this scenario are mainly tracking the players and giving hints when required. There's usually a lot of downtime while they're doing this, so you may find them on their phones or something, being distracted every now and then because, we want to give them something to do, especially if the groups only need the occasional hint and there's not much interaction. So why not use that time? Why not find ways for the GM to interact with the group? Small interactions, done well, will also add to the sense of player engagement within the game, as the players have a sense their actions will be met with a response.
Just to clarify, we're not talking about how a GM can improve the customer's experience. For that, go watch the talk by Jason, Saskia, and Sarah. But we're talking about the perspective of game design and how the GM interaction can be worked into the game itself. The question we're asking is, how can GMs interact with the player in a way that drives the narrative, adds to the room's atmosphere, or becomes a part of a puzzle? It doesn't even have to be a major part of the game. Something that you may have seen a number of rooms do would be the GM, for example, coming into the room in a mask for a scare, or in costume for a laugh.
Juliet is here! If you use a voice of God system, it might be a good idea to have a short back and forth between the players and the GM and getting them to do something complex, particularly something that can't really be detected by technology. or that's a really, really hard to detect with technology. And we don't mean striking a certain pose or saying a specific phrase.
Never gonna give you up.
And a number of Play Online GM avatar games have made really good use of this GM needing to be in the room sort of mechanic. Having a GM instead of AI voice recognition run the show means you don't get caught out by things like strong accents or general tech troubles.
Think about things where the inclusion of a human facilitator is almost necessary. For example, having players act or interact with each other in certain ways. The kind of elements where having an actual human decide if the player actions are not enough, so that they can give feedback or even egg them on more. So that will make the most of the experience. There's a reason tabletop RPGs haven't replaced DMs with computerized ones, for the most part.
Well done, humans. You have successfully activated the control panel. This calls for a celebration. Celebrate more, humans. Celebration is mandatory.
Now, this does work best for companies that use a 1 GM per game approach, but it is possible to work this in where a GM will monitor multiple games as well, as long as the timings of those games are suitably staggered and the GM is really on top of things. For example, we have a competitive room where the GM plays the role of a show host. And throughout the game, they're announcing the progress of each team to keep up the tension and get the adrenaline really pumping.
And the red team has won their first team dice. Can the blue team catch up?
While we could use an automated announcer for this, having a GM do it means that they can also personalize the announcements to every group based on what they've seen, how the other team is going, and so on and so forth. The GM isn't physically in the room themselves. They come in via the speakers in the roof, but they still play a really important role beyond giving hints.
In one of our other games, the GM is actually used as part of the puzzle. In this game, they play a snarky AI, think sort of Portal GLaDOS style. And while they aren't in the room itself, the interactions the GM sort of does plays a key role in allowing the players to progress. It also allows the players to do things that would be a pain in the ass for an actual AI to detect. And the GM can also key off the mood of the group in the room, which is really good. For this way, this means we can push like an enthusiastic group to do more, or we can hold back a bit for a team that might be a bit shy.
And we've also used our GMs in other ways. In every game, we have them interact with players generally as a character, such as a sarcastic narrator, like Stanley Parable style, if you know that game, or commentate on the player's actions.
Like 8 of them.
Yes.
So like,
You just realized that was just a stain on the wall, and it was not part of any puzzle.
Or even as a hapless stagehand who has no idea what is going on.
Do you have the costume for me?
In the latter example, we also take advantage of the GM's role where they're going in and out to have them grab items the players have found and run them up to stage. Which it does open up additional narrative interactions at these points where the GM can do things like assure the players nothing else will possibly go wrong with the play for the laughs. The GM also plays a really important role in the ending, which involves getting the players to do something that will not be spoiled.
And this also leads into the next kind of social interaction you can change up. That's between the players themselves within the game. So you see this a lot on a puzzle level, where players need to coordinate amongst themselves in different ways to solve it. The most common example is a magnet maze with a key, or where one person remotely controls an item that they actually can't see and have to rely on other players. But how about how they interact during the course of the game more generally?
Well, we've seen some great examples of this, such as a pair of games in Australia where the players are in 2 rooms with different narratives, different puzzles, but narratively they are still on opposing sides, and the ending lets them play it out based on who finishes first. So you really want to be the first one done. There are also games where the group is forcibly split into separate rooms at some point, and they have to make individual choices that affect one another. We've also heard of a particular room where teams racing through those 2 separate rooms can cast spells on one another to hinder their progress and, turn out all the lights in the other room, for example.
So these create a different social dynamic between the players. While you can still facilitate cooperation between the players within a team, you can also throw in a more strategic overarching element where they have to consider how they interact with the other team or another team in a way that's more than just finish the game first.
You could take inspiration from TV shows like Survivor, books like The Hunger Games, things like that, where personal interest wars with team interest, and you have to balance both. Or how about TV game shows where it's team versus team in various scenarios, different overall structure, but instead of general knowledge or physical skills used to compete, they have to compete by solving puzzles faster than each other. There's so many places you can take inspiration from. Think party games such as Throw Throw Burrito or Codenames even. They're worth analysing for the kind of inter-player interactions they encourage, as well as how they achieve it.
So in one of our games, we throw two opposing teams in the same space, with a central item that they both need to use in order to progress. The room is filled with puzzles that have a the same method of solving it, but they get a different answer. So this means teams can actually spy on each other, or give away the method of solving the puzzle if they're not careful or discreet enough.
Oi! Get out!
So teams can ask for hints, but both teams will hear what the GM says. So all of this serves to create many situations that force interesting interactions between the players. Though we should add, this works a lot better for groups that know each other. If you bring in public games where half the group knows each other and half the group doesn't, then we could create a very unstable dynamic.
Of course, creating these interesting interactions doesn't necessarily need to be antagonistic. Think about those moments when you kind of look at each other and go do we really have to do this? And yes, you do. So you all end up with a shared kind of embarrassment where you hopefully come out laughing, and it's actually pretty memorable. It could be one puzzle. It could be the ending to an entire game.
We're not spoiling ours. Sorry. Again, the best way to come up with ideas is to analyze other cooperative games or media. Take Pandemic or Hanabi, for example. They're great, well-known cooperative board games. Or you can look at how other multiplayer games like World of Warcraft or Diablo work. These ones force groups to work together in different ways. We're not saying to imitate them, but instead to critically analyze how they make it work and see if you can gain some inspiration from them in terms of how you can get players to interact in the overall game.
It's actually really fun to explore what kinds of interactions you can encourage beyond cooperation that pushes the social relationship aspects of the group. And it makes for some really interesting design. As for the other way of changing up your game design...
So the other way we enjoy playing with mechanics is by giving the room itself an overarching mechanic. You can still have puzzles and challenges with their own mechanics themselves, but these feed into the room's overall mechanic. It probably makes more sense with an example. What would you think if we were to pitch a Minecraft room?
Copyright infringement.
Yeah, okay, fine, fair. How about a craft mine room?
An escape room with puzzles themed around a game that's just like Minecraft, but with slightly tweaked references so you can't be sued.
Okay, let's go with that. So for most people, that's generally the first or second thing that comes to mind. But it's not what we mean. What we're talking about here is a room that uses the mechanics of Minecraft instead.
So, in Minecraft, people explore the world, collect materials, and combine them in various ways to make other materials, tools, items, structures. It's all about collecting and combining. That's the central mechanic.
So now imagine a game where you have to solve puzzles to mine materials and then combine them. And then you get a new item to proceed. So essentially it's like you're crafting in Minecraft, but it's part of a different game.
It's more physical.
Yeah. And then the item you get, for example, is a pickaxe, and you use that to knock down a wall to proceed to the next room. Well, not knock down an actual wall because we're in an escape room and obviously player damaging the wall is a bad thing. But I mean, it's actually designed so you tap it maybe and the wall opens.
Yes, please do not destroy walls in actual escape rooms.
So you still have puzzles with all your usual puzzle mechanics, but the puzzles are there to simply serve the macro room mechanic. In this case, combining the items to make a new one to access new places or new puzzles.
Another example of a different room mechanic could be a game that plays with odds. For example, solving puzzles adds power to your spaceship, and the more power you have, the higher your chances of a successful launch. You can either choose to take your chances at any point, or wait until you're out of time, or if you're good enough, wait until you've finished all the puzzles, and then go for the ending.
So all of this to say, escape rooms don't necessarily need to run with the solve a puzzle, progress through a narrative, escape framework. Why not explore other ways you can structure the game? For example, why does a timer have to be a countdown timer? Why can't you time an experience in other ways or on other measures?
Hey, is the coffee cold yet?
Lukewarm.
Okay, quick, let's keep going.
So from experiencing, changing the framework can be risky and will probably need a bit more beta testing than usual in order to get it perfect. But even then, it can still be an uphill battle and a challenge to sell to players of the game. But if you do it well, it can really pay off.
Okay, so here's the question we know we're going to be asked. But how do you come up with the inspiration? As an indie video game nerd, can I say this is an amazing place to mine for ideas? The entire premise of indie video games is that they allow devs to take chances and play with unconventional mechanics that AAA games really can't afford to because they have big budgets. For example, there's a great game called One Shot that's all about breaking the fourth wall with you as a player. There's another called Return of the Obra Dinn, which is the most complex logic puzzle you will ever attempt. Heaven's Vault is about using environmental context and repeated language patterns to piece together a forgotten language. Spy Party has one person trying to blend in with NPCs to complete tasks while their opponent must pick them out of the crowd and then snipe them. So, where to start with games? If you want a place to start, I have made a list of games that have really cool and unique mechanics. Right here, because friends kept asking me for game recs.
So much like with the player interaction examples, we don't mean try to imitate the game exactly in the context of an escape room. It is, again, about critically analyzing how they use the mechanics in their game and seeing how you can use it to spice up your own game designs. For example, we loved the amusing communication created in a game called Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes. We didn't use any of their specific mechanics, but we sort of played on the idea of having them players communicate instructions at certain intervals throughout the game, and it really led to some fun exchanges between the players.
Okay, press I and C. I did! You mean I what the pirate says and see what they say alone? Isn't it I what you see with and see with your eyes? Oh, what?
Video games are just one example. You could go down the interactive theatre route in ways that don't require a full complement of performers per game. That's really expensive, by the way. And you can do that by, for example, using pre-recorded video.
Or you could use surround sound audio mixed with GM interaction, as we did with one of our games. But you might need to use a visual element as well to keep most players' attention.
Or, if you love language, why not have puzzles which reveal partially translated bits of an unknown language, and an overarching puzzle for players to use the pieces to translate a phrase or sentence that's revealed from the beginning.
So you're using Heaven's Vault as inspiration, which is also a video game, right?
Shush.
Yeah. Mm. So everyone has fascinating and diverse hobbies that some of us may not have even heard about. So why not see how you can weave those into the structure of your room designs?
Or you could change up the general mode of progression for the overall game. The first game we created back in 2016 had optional objectives for the players to complete after getting to the escape, which allowed us to adjust for player experience level and, give players with a lot of experience more things to do. So it's definitely one of our more traditional escape games, But since the two objectives have two parallel puzzle streams, it does allow for both staggered difficulty levels, and it works great with large groups.
Meanwhile, our much newer competitive room is based around the ideas of having two teams racing each other to press a winner button at the end by solving puzzles.
It's an example of puzzles being used as the building blocks for a different kind of framework. The core is not about progressing narratively through various spaces. The core is the actual competition between the players and the dynamics that come from that. It's different to having players race through two identical rooms because the room is specially designed to have players feel that tension of competing face to face. And then an ending that forces them to work together so there's not too many bad feelings.
We also have an upcoming game where you solve puzzles to progress. It's sort of based on a and essentially you become and helping them out. So hopefully this talk has given you a launching point to play with different ideas regarding the structure of your rooms. Ones that are feasible and sustainable for owners on a budget. There's still so much territory for escape room games to explore, we think, and there are definitely some game concepts out there still waiting to be made, waiting for you guys to come up with.
If we can bring it back to video games, it's...
Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. It's like the difference between AAA games and indie games. You might not be able to afford a multi-million-dollar set and AV lighting like the really big companies, but you can still carve out your own niche with unique game design elements, player interactions, and overall game mechanics.
But for awesome set design on a budget, check out Maurice and David's talk. So you have more flexibility to experiment when there aren't big dollars on the line, and people other than you expecting returns.
Yeah.
There's more room to get it wrong, to play around, to basically fail, start again, and then come up with something even better. And that's an advantage I think you guys can run with.
So go play around with design ideas. Read books, watch movies, play games, see what strikes your fancy. Not all of your ideas will work, but it's so rewarding when you find the ones that do. And if you've signed up for a pro ticket, there's facilitated discussions after the live Q&A so that you can share and exchange your ideas and inspirations, talk about cool designs that you've come up with, create your own, talk about your experiences with experimenting, see what others have done as well.
All right. Oh, okay, that's quite cold.
That means we're out of time, and this talk is over. Thanks, guys.